Welcome to the TalentGrow Show, where you can get actionable, results-oriented insight and advice on how to take your leadership, communication, and people skills to the next level and become the kind of leader people want to follow. And now, your host and leadership development strategist, Halelly Azulay.
Welcome back, Talent Growers. I'm Halelly Azulay, your leadership development strategist here at TalentGrow, and I'm looking forward to sharing today's episode with you. I'll prepare you. It's very full of interesting information for you to chew on. My guest is award-winning learning expert and author of Unstoppable You, Adopt the New 4.0 Mindset and Change Your Life. Her name is Pat McLagan. Built on the success of her 40-year career, her very impressive 40-year career, you'll hear her describe it, Pat explains what her Learning 4.0 framework is all about and how you can use it to become a much better learner and a much better leader. She describes how Learning 4.0 compares to 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0 learning techniques. She talks about what managers and supervisors no longer can afford to do and the 7 powerful practices of lifelong learning, which she says apply whether you're learning by yourself, learning in a team, helping someone else learn, or being helped by someone to learn. This episode is so chock full of insights and wisdom, you'll probably want to hear it twice just to squeeze all the juice out of it. Strap on your seatbelt and get ready for it. Here we go. Welcome back, Talent Growers. I'm so excited to share with you my guest this week, who is Pat McLagan. And Pat's life and work focus on institutional transition and transformation. And she has been a key player in the midst of decades of institutional change. Her speaking and consulting focus is on strategy and goal execution and on the successful implementation of major changes, especially changes focused on transcending traditional boundaries across levels and organizational silos and other boundaries. And we're going to talk most specifically about Pat's latest book titled Unstoppable You, Adopt the New Learning 4.0 Mindset and Change Your Life. Pat, welcome to the TalentGrow Show.
Thanks, Halelly. I'm really delighted to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
It's my pleasure.
Hello to everybody out there in podcast land.
It's my pleasure, and thank you for joining us. I'm looking forward to talking with you about this topic. But before we go there, you've had an illustrious and an interesting career. And so the challenge for you will be, how can you encapsulate your overall professional journey in just a couple of minutes for us, just so we get a sense of where you started and how you got to where you are today?
Okay. Yeah, thank you. You know, it's always easy to look back on your career because I certainly didn't expect to do the things that I've been doing or end up where I've ended up. But when I look back, I think my work and my life has always been about learning, and it's always been about taking on your personal power and about helping other people be able to take on theirs. And I know that your audience is very interested in that. I started out actually 40 years ago teaching learning skills at the University of Minnesota to people who were coming back from the Vietnam War. And I thought I had a problem of teaching them skills for learning and being able to succeed in the college environment. But what I discovered was that there are real issues related to their own sense of personal power and self-confidence. And that pretty much shaped how I approached really the rest of my work in my life. Back after the university, I found my way into organizations, and I was working with 3M and Honeywell and General Mills. I grew up in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. And I brought the learning program to these companies. And actually, it was mostly managers, supervisors, and executives that came to these programs because they wanted to learn how to handle information better. They wanted to learn how to learn better. They felt that things were changing around them and they weren't being able to keep up. And I brought that learning perspective initially to the people who were doing the learning. But then I found myself meeting people in the training and development departments. And back then, training and development was just an embryonic field. There was very little going on, even in major corporations. And I found myself talking with the people who were starting these learning and development programs for supervisors, managers, technical people. I found myself talking with them about learning and how they can design programs so that the learner learn better. And I had apparently a very unique perspective on this because some of my clients referred me to General Electric. And as a young starting out consultant, I was brought into GE to their Crotonville leadership development operation. And I have to tell you, I didn't realize what a big deal that was. And I did a program for all of their Crotonville staff that focused on how do you design learning experiences where people get more out of them and the learner is more active. GE really liked it, and they hired me to do a lot of program redesign so that their supervisory programs could be more action focused, so that their leadership programs could be more action focused. And I had written a book that they bought 10,000 copies of, so I thought I was pretty much in consultant heaven. Then they referred me to NASA, and I ended up helping NASA develop their first agency-wide leadership program, again trying to get the learners, the leaders and supervisors and managers to have more of an application focus to the things that they were learning. And that pretty much set my career off. And I found myself then working globally on primarily with organizations that were primarily going through big changes in technology. I worked with the telecoms during the breakup of the telecommunication industry. I worked with financial services. And lately, I've been very interested in supply chain because I think supply chain thinking is breaking down the barriers between companies, and it's putting a lot more pressure on people who are doing the work and the people who are supervising the people who are doing the work to actually have a more strategic kind of mindset. So I've been working primarily in the transition sort of arena, and I built a company back in the 80s and into the early 90s that focused mostly on these new kinds of approaches to managing change that were very focused on getting learning ramped up and much more of an action focus and fast kind of track of learning into real action. And at the time, I was also helping to develop the learning and development field. I was very active in the American Society for Training and Development, and we did a couple of big studies of what it was going to take to really develop people for the future. I got invited to speak globally, and I ended up in South Africa, and that became a very important part of my life and career because South Africa, this was before the end of apartheid and ultimately during the end of apartheid, was going through massive changes. And they needed to develop their people to be able to deal with these changes. In particular, they had a big supervisor problem because trade unions had just been legalized and the managers and supervisors didn't know how to deal with the challenges that was creating. And of course, you had a vast workforce that wasn't prepared to work in corporations, and we had to get them skilled up. So I found myself spending a whole decade, primarily in South Africa, working with people all the way from the top to the bottom, at the board level, with managers, with supervisors, and with the workers themselves, trying to help them become more able to deal in this very competitive environment. As part of that, I did a lot of work on redesigning the performance management systems to ensure that the relationship between the supervisor and the worker was a much more of a participative, two-way communication relationship. And that has become really one of the themes of my work is how do we really install participation and a participative leadership style in a business. It's very important that we do that because we can't afford anymore to have managers and supervisors being more of a top-down way of thinking. They can't move fast enough, and the organization can't move fast enough if every time a person on the job has to look to the boss for approvals. So I've been finding that supervisors and managers are in a much bigger sort of challenging position of helping their employees become much more self-managing within the framework that of getting the business of the business done. So I've been, throughout all of this, I think fundamentally focused on the human side of the business, helping build organizations and ways of managing that are more participative, helping develop the communication skills that are more two-way, helping people be able to learn faster and better so that the organization can move and be agile and innovative like most of the organizations are saying they want to be. I'm very interested in everything that has to do with transformation and supporting everybody to be able to work in an environment where people take on the roles that they need to take on, are empowered, and are getting coaching type of support from those people that are in formal leadership roles. Been quite a journey lately.
Yes.
I've worked also with public enterprise organizations, and it also applies there.
Wow, so impressive and so we feel fortunate. I think I speak for the listeners. We're fortunate to have you share some of your experience with us today. And I've known you for, I think, a few years because we belong to a couple of different professional associations. And I just saw you speak about this new book recently at a conference we both spoke at. And I can tell you, talent growers, that Pat is so full of passion about this topic. And I thought we want to learn from knowledgeable people, but we definitely want to learn from passionate people. So this idea of the learning 4.0 mindset that you've written about in this latest book, you describe that everyone needs to become an effective lifelong learner, and that there are 7 practices in the book. Of course, everybody should go get a copy because we can't possibly do it justice in this 30-minute format. But I want to bring some of that value to listeners. So 7 practices, and I'd love for you to just highlight the 7 practices. Don't go into all of them in detail.
Sure.
But then maybe we can just think in terms of how can leaders really best use this insight in their leadership practice, both as a learner themselves, but also as a developer of others.
Just a quick way of introducing this whole idea of learning 4.0 is that we need a way of learning, an approach to learning, and ways of thinking about learning that are appropriate to today. We live in a world where artificial intelligence is going to take over, they say, 40% of all the jobs that are out there. And I believe that this is probably going to happen. And it's going to change a lot of the jobs that people have. So there's a massive shift going on that everybody out there knows in the world of work. And our learning processes are, in some cases, in the dark ages. We're still using what I call 1.0, which is the techniques that we were born with, trial and error and imitation. Or some of us use a lot of school techniques if we know that we're learning. So study skills and memory skills and concentration techniques that may or may not be all that relevant. And others are using what I might call 3.0 techniques, which are more the skills and learning process we make up when we meet real adult problems. But we need to go beyond it and upgrade ourselves. It's like a big software upgrade in our brain to bring us to learning 4.0. So it's within that context of learning 4.0, which is a very imaginative way of learning. It uses all this new knowledge that we have about our brain. It uses our body and how our body actually helps us with our learning process. It uses sleep. It enables us to get into learning materials that never existed before. We have a massive, very new learning challenge. So it's in that context that I want to introduce these 7 practices. And I think for supervisors and managers, as I'm going through this list, think about yourself in a coaching relationship with somebody and imagine yourself, instead of coming up with a solution to a problem or telling them what to do in learning, imagine you're helping them use these practices so that while you're helping them learn something, you're helping them learn how to learn. I think that is a big role of the supervisor and manager. First practice, a 4.0 learner is very sensitive to calls to learn. If you're a 4.0 learner, you go throughout your day, you'll notice, oh, that meeting, I can learn something in that meeting. Or here's a person who's just walking by my office. I think I have something to learn from that person. You're tuned in at a very much more sensitive level to the learning opportunities around you. And I think supervisors can help the people that they support to be more tuned into the learning opportunities that happen for them every day. We've got to start grabbing those. The second practice I call create future pull. We know that our brain has a massive imaginative capability, and that when we imagine how we want our lives to be, and we make that imagining a very whole-bodied, almost immersive virtual reality experience in our brain, that image creates a motivational pull that will help us notice things that we want, that will help us learn, that will motivate us to do things that are much more difficult than we might have thought. We have this massive imaginative power. And I think we've lost some of it because we have so much media around us. But we need to now start activating that. And I think another thing, supervisors can say to people, what are you imagining? What does that future look like? If you could build this skill, how would you use it? Where would you use it? How would it make your life better? getting people and doing this yourself to activate that imagination. That's the second one. The third relates to searching. The 4.0 learner has to find the best information. And we know we are overloaded, inundated with information, and it is increasing by the billions of megabits every day. So how do we find the information we need and the support we need for learning? We cannot do it all ourselves. So the 4.0 learner is really good at searching. Now, all of us use search engines, but there are a lot more tools that are evolving for the 4.0 learner. There are aggregators. We can go to experts. There are ways of asking questions of experts to find the best information. But unfortunately, most people settle for whatever comes to them easily. And so they end up with learning material and with learning programs and with information that isn't the best for them. So the 4.0 learner in number 3 is a really good searcher. Number 4, the 4.0 learner does something I call connect the dots, which is kind of another way of saying has plans that enable them to achieve their bigger learning goals. Maybe you want to learn a language. Maybe you want to get ready for that middle management job. All of us have some form of more complex learning goal. We're learning every day, bit by bit in the moment, but we also have these longer term goals. So we need to be able to set ourselves up to be able to achieve those goals. And it involves things like setting up your environment. It involves picking the best learning experiences. It involves changing course when you learn something that calls you off into another direction. So being able to continually connect and reconnect the learning dots and see that you're on a path, that's really how to think about it. It's like you're an adventurer going on to a big journey in the forest. And you know you have this plan, but the path isn't there. So you kind of cut the path, and the path doesn't go exactly where you want it to go, but it's maybe a better path when you're finished. You've got to be aware of that and connect these dots and manage that process. The 5th is something I call mining for gold. 5 and 6 actually are what most people think about when they think about learning. When you're mining for gold, you're sitting there with in your course, or you're in a meeting, or you're having a conversation, or you're listening to a presentation, or you're doing a more formal thing like a case study, or you're reading an article, or you're reading a book. You're in that situation. You've got to get the information that you need out of it. But every learning resource is structured differently. You don't do the same thing when you're listening to a talk as you do when you're reading an article. You don't do the same thing when you're learning from experience or looking back at a past experience that you do when you're learning in a game. So the 4.0 learner understands how to go about pulling the gold out of the situations that they're in, and they're really good at it. I used to teach reading, and most people don't know how to read a book. They don't know how to get things out of a book. So they feel intimidated rather than in control and empowered. So mining for gold, it also includes how we concentrate, knowing how to concentrate and use your brain and your body. Most people do not know how to use their physical resources. They don't know when to stop. They don't know how to use breaks. They don't know how to use sleep. They don't know when to focus their deeper learning in the day. And we know about the brain, and a lot of the new brain knowledge tells us very new and dramatically different things about what works when we want to concentrate and get information and remember it. The 6th practice is learning to last. And this one is where it gets probably a little bit more interesting, because when you think about wanting to learn something, let's say you have a goal to learn some communication skills. Probably there are some things you want to remember, like there might be a set of steps about what to do when you're in a performance conversation. Step 1, step 2, step 3. So you want to remember that. That's a memory problem. And then you probably have a skill that you want to develop, like being able to communicate in a particular way when you feel under stress and under attack. That might be a skill. So you do something different when you're developing that skill than if you are trying to remember something. But most people don't know how to approach skill development in a way that will build a skill that's different from how you approach a memory problem when you want to remember something. So the 4.0 learner knows the techniques to use to get particular learning results. And they are able, therefore, to be a lot more effective, remember things better. They're more successful in changing habits. They're more successful in changing skills. And if you are a supervisor, it's important to know when you're coaching people whether you're coaching something to remember or coaching a skill to develop, or maybe you're coaching an attitude to change. Mm-hmm. That's a whole other can of worms. So there are different techniques there. And then the seventh is transferring learning to life. I think this is sort of an amusing one and yet it's extremely difficult because people can know how to do something, can have a skill, they can know the steps, but they don't do it in real life. So you have to be able to transfer that learning into a real life situation. And to do that, you have to be very good at two things. One is you have to know how to change a habit, because habits are one of our biggest barriers to personal change out in the real world. We have the intention, think about diet, we have an intention to eat well. And then we get out in the real world and we can't, and that our habits, pull us in the same old direction. Right. So managing habits. And then the other thing that you have to do to transfer learning to life is to be able to manage the environment, to get allies, to set up your environment so that you have a half of a chance of success in implementing things. So those are the 7 practices. Hear the call, create future pull with a great imagination, search far and wide and be smart in your searching, connect the dots, mine for gold, pull the information out no matter what you're using, learn to last and use the learning techniques that relate to the particular outcome you want, and be able to transfer your learning into life. And those apply whether you're learning by yourself, they apply if you're learning in a team, they apply if you're helping somebody learn, and they apply if you're being helped by somebody to learn. Those are my suggestions.
And that's so much, it's so much information. And you did a marvelous job of encapsulating all of it very quickly. And maybe people will need to listen to this a couple of times to get all that down. Wow. I want to ask you a question. I didn't want to interrupt you, but it came up for me.
Sure.
It sounded like that there's this interesting tension between 1 and 3, because I hear that in the first practice.
Hear the call?
Yeah, hear the call. This openness, allows you to kind of always be scanning for everything that's going on, because you never know what might present a learning opportunity. But in number 3, you have to be a curator so that you don't become overwhelmed and kind of know how to screen some things. You notice it, but you block it. And some of them you notice, but you go towards it. And I think there's many tensions in what you've described that probably cause challenges for people, but that probably is one of the first ones. I certainly know it is one for me. Any tips on how to manage that tension?
Well, I think that the hear the call is more of an awareness thing. I think a lot of people go through their day on automatic, and they're not just noticing the beauty of the trees or they're not noticing the signals they're getting inside of themselves when they're in an uncomfortable or an exciting situation. Our bodies give us signals about learning too. If we're with certain people and we get that awful feeling in our stomach, that's a sign. It could be a sign to learn something. So with that first one, I'm just saying here, just be more conscious of the world inside of you and the world around you. And it's really part of this whole thing about meditation too, is to become more aware of the flow of things around you. Because I think the learner of tomorrow has to get out of his or her shell.
Yeah.
And that's really what the call to learn is about. Okay. The searching far and wide is a little bit farther along. When you think you have a need, now you're trying to find a resource. And where are you going to go to get it? And what's the best? You want to learn budgeting skills. You want to be able to budget better. So now you see this book on the shelf and you pull it out and that's what you use. I'm saying, wait, before you do that, ask somebody who knows or do a little bit of a search. So the time that you spend learning something is with the best resource you can find, not just the most convenient one. That's really what that one is about.
Great. Thank you. That does clarify everything. So
yeah, it's a good question though.
Well, thank you. What do you think, given all of that first of all, it just sounds like it makes sense. And part of, I think part of what people might feel is, oh yeah, I knew that. And then part of what they might feel hearing you describe all of those practices is overwhelm, like, oh my gosh, that's so much to do.
Yeah.
For leaders, what do you think is the biggest opportunity that they could have for maybe a big return on investment of time or a big tick up in performance, or maybe a big return in terms of team morale or whatever kind of result you think they could see, that is a really big opportunity if they use these practices to unleash their team's performance?
Well, there's so many things, but let me just highlight one that I think there's a very high payoff.
Okay.
Think about project teams, and you mentioned teams. Most project teams focus on their work as a performance problem. So we have to perform, we have to develop something, we have to complete this project, and they go full bore into performing. And now here you have, let's say, a group of 6 or 7 people working on this project team, that when they're in a performance mode, people often get competitive. They often are afraid to talk about problems. There's a culture of performance that can take over that actually works against another set of goals you have in a project team, and that is a goal for innovating, a goal for sharing information, a goal for fast recognition of problems. I think Agile does this, but I still observe a lot of teams that approach their work more as performance and competitive situation rather than a learning situation. And it's not an either or. In my book, I have a whole chapter on 4.0 teams and how you can, when you first set up your project team, how you can set up that project team as a learning team in a very specific way, a very specific set of steps. And I guarantee if you set up your learning team as your project team as a learning team, and one of the things, for example, just to have the team talk about what it expects to learn in the process as a team, and just having individuals talk about what they hope to learn as an individual, given the other people that are in the team and given the nature of the project and given the resources that the company is giving them. Just having that conversation alone will open up some opportunities. Like you might tell me, Pat, you know a lot about learning. I want to learn, I'm hoping that I come out of this able to coach somebody better. So I then will probably share some information with you about that as we're going through our project, because I know you're interested in that. So just setting it up that way. And there are a lot of other things you can do, but at the heart of everything, we will not create a learning organization if people aren't learning. And we will not create a learning organization if teams aren't learning teams. If we can solve the problem at that level, and that's where that's where your listeners are, that is the heart of culture. That is where it is. People at the top can say all they want about, we have to be agile, we have to be innovative, we have to be fast-paced and all of that. And the next year when they do their engagement surveys, they're going to get the same result, because these things cannot be mandated from the top. They can only be implemented in life, in people's day-to-day interactions. And that's where the supervisor, the middle managers live. I think that is the big transformation challenge, is to bring a learning mindset into everything. And you know what is really cool? Performance benefits.
Say more. What do you mean?
Performance benefits because you're going to get more innovation. You're going to solve problems quicker. You're going to have people more motivated because people want to be in a learning environment. And it's going to become more and more true. People are leaving companies because they're not getting the learning opportunities, and they have the wrong thing in mind. They think a learning opportunity is a course. Yeah. Yes, that's true. But a learning opportunity is in every moment of the day. And if I'm in a team where I'm learning, that's learning. So, we can't leave learning to the professionals to develop, because we'll never be able to learn. They'll never be able to keep up with the learning needs ever. We know that project teams need to, of course you need to deliver the project, but we want innovation. We want fast recognition of problems. And those are all things that are facilitated by a learning culture.
Great advice. I love it. And I hope that people go out and check out your book, because there's obviously so much more to this than what we're able to share here. But this is a great framework to use and a lens to help people recognize that learning is everybody's job. And
right.
As you said at the beginning, to empower everyone to be in charge of their own learning. And of course, leaders have that extra responsibility of helping the leaders others. Yeah. Well, good.
70% of all learning is self-managed.
Yes.
I mean, this is a common model. I think actually that's not even, I think there's more. 70% is self-managed. 20% is managed or directed by people who are not professionals. They don't know what they're doing, basically. Yeah. They're your friends, they're your experts, and so often they're supervisors and managers. And only a few percent is really facilitated by by professionals.
Yeah, so the 70-20-10 rule.
The learning opportunity is. Yeah, that's right, exactly.
I have it in my book too, because it's all about employee development on a shoestring and outside the classroom environment, because that's where learning happens anyway.
Absolutely. And the learner is the only common denominator in all of it. So the learner actually is in charge of it 100% of the time.
Yeah. Well, I agree with that completely. Well, Pat, before you tell folks how to stay in touch with you and before you share one really actionable specific tip, can you give us a very, very top level tidbit about what's really exciting and new for you nowadays?
Well, everything that I'm doing now is to launch the Learning 4.0 mindset. Mm-hmm. I want people to be smart, unstoppable learners. I believe that it's important and critical to transform this world. We have got to get ourselves ahead of technology, and that's what learning. We have to be smarter than technology. We're already talking about smart technology that does deep learning and all of that. We should be smart and smarter than technology and be doing the deep learning too, so we can stay in charge of this thing that we're creating. So I'm developing a program called Boost, which will boost people's capabilities into a 4.0 level.
Cool.
And I'm also working with some organizations to help develop their learning and development professionals so that they become more of a force for 4.0 learning. And that's where I'm spending my time. I'll be talking about this and writing about it, because I believe that one of the problems we have in this world today is people are not smart enough learners. They're easily manipulated. They're easily sort of overwhelmed and depressed by the state of all the changes going on. We have to do something about that.
Mm. And you are a woman on a mission, Pat. So thank you for that. I love that energy.
Very true.
So what's one really specific, very actionable tip you can leave our listeners with that they could put into place right away as soon as they finish listening to this, to take themselves closer to a Learning 4.0 style, whether as a person or as a leader?
Well, this is pretty simple, but sometimes the simple is not easy to get into our schedule. And it won't take very long.
Okay.
I want you to think about yourself as a powerful learner. I want you to really, really see yourself as an evolving, developing human being. And tonight, before you go to bed, I want you to look back at your day and identify the situations that you were in that were learning opportunities. Like, this is obviously one, hopefully. But what are all and they could have been very informal. Look at the situations you were in that are learning opportunities and think about what you did. Did you ask questions or did you make statements? The questioning is more, or did you think questions or did you think resistance? So we want a learning attitude about those opportunities. Doesn't mean we don't, express our opinion, but look at all of those. It could be a person you met or an article that came across your desk or a meeting you were at or a conversation you had, but you didn't really mine it, or a conversation with one of your kids where you didn't really pull out a little more to learn what's going on in their lives. Look back and make yourself more aware. And the second thing I want to also say, it relates to this. I have an app on iPhone. It's free. And it's called Brighter Every Day. And every day you can get a tip like this that will help you step by step become a better learner. Unfortunately, I don't have it on Android yet, but it's there free on the iPhone. And it's just a little thing you can do, something new every day that will build you in one of these areas. It won't even tell you necessarily what the area is. But if you do it every day, I guarantee that a year from now, you will have propelled yourself into the 4.0 learning stratosphere. And that will affect your life in so many ways, your life, your career, your confidence, your ability to help other people, your ability to work in teams. That's what I want to see happen.
Wonderful. And the Android is in the works? That's going to come out on Android at some point?
It's in the works, and I don't know exactly. I've just contracted to have that developed. It's a real simple app. Yeah. It just says, today do this,
Yeah.
and here's why.
Well,
And
that's
that's
what we need.
it. There's not a big deal.
Well, that's what we need. Simple and actionable.
Absolutely.
And your tip
yeah,
was
for sure.
good. I appreciate it so much, Pat, and your time.
Can I just tell people that they can go to learning4.0.com?
That was my next question. So yes, please.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm sorry. I'm getting ahead of you.
That's awesome. Good. Go for it. Where can people stay in touch with you and learn more from you?
So I have a website. There's stuff on the website. There are book reviews. And, I'm trying to I really want to see something happen here for people to get better as learners and helpers. So www.learning4.com, or you can reach me at pat@patmclagan.com.
Okay.
Learning4.0.com or pat@patmclagan.com.
Yeah. And that,
so, let's
zero,
build
right?
a better
number 0.
4.0. That's right.
Yeah.
Yes. That's probably a better way to say it. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you. You were saying you had
No, I just want to say, the whole idea is to have people have a better life and for us to have better organizations. And I think if we do that, we'll have a better world. And I'm worried about some of the things going on in our world today. So it makes it even more important.
Well, I think that that's very commendable and inspiring. I think also very intellectually stimulating. And I hope that you as a listener are stimulated enough to follow up in some way. Of course, take the action that Pat suggested, but go further and seek out those additional learning opportunities from her and others. But Pat, in the meantime, we really appreciate you coming on the Talent Grow Show and sharing your wisdom with the listeners. Thank you.
Thank you, Halelly. And thanks, everybody. I hope there was one gem at least in this conversation.
Well, there were many. And if you would like, maybe drop us a comment and let us know what was the biggest aha for you. And that would be a wonderful way for us to make this a double loop learning virtuous cycle. Pat, thank you again. Take care.
Thanks, Halelly. All the best, everybody.
What did I tell you? A lot to consider, right? But I think it's really fascinating. I hope you enjoyed it, Talent Growers. I hope that you found it valuable and that you'll check out Pat's website and book and all the other links on the show notes page at talentgrow.com/podcast/episode67. And of course, while you're there, and if you haven't yet, download my free guide called 10 Mistakes That Leaders Make, and that will allow you to not make those mistakes. And also it will put you on my mailing list for my short, actionable, and fun and informal weekly newsletter. I hope that you will go and do that. Talent Grow Show has been selected to be part of the C-Suite Radio network of high-quality business podcasts. So you can check it out over there, c-suiteradio.com, and get lots of leadership advice and insights. Well, that's it for this episode. I'm Halelly Azulay, your leadership development strategist here at Talent Grow. And I hope that until the next time, you make today great.
Thanks for listening to the Talent Grow Show, where we help you develop your talent to become the kind of leader that people want to follow. For more information, visit talentgrow.com.